Into Agni. Good morning. Hi, everybody. Kay Brown, how are you? Ann 31962. Hello, hello. Jordan Watson and 28 others all at the same time, so I didn't see your name, but I want to thank you so much for joining us today. Today is a new day, and I'm grateful for that. Grateful for the gift of this day, and I'm grateful that the vaccines are making their way across the country. I'm cognizant that so many businesses, particularly restaurants in so many states, are struggling, small business owners, entrepreneurs. So that's actually why I wanted to talk to Dan Price. It's why I wanted to do this conversation today, because I know so many people out there, businesses are struggling. I know business owners are struggling. I know employees are struggling. And I thought my son Patrick told me about Dan Price and what he had done by cutting his own salary and raising the salaries of all the people who work for him over at Gravity Payments to $70,000. And I've been watching his Twitter feed, his Instagram feed, his take on the kind of systemic problems that we have that keep people living paycheck to paycheck, what leaders can do and how they can adjust. And I thought, that's exactly who I want to talk to. I want to talk to somebody who's got ideas, who's actually been done some things himself and has some takes. And so I thought, well, let's talk to Dan. Let's talk to Dan. He's young, he's creative, he's daring, he's bold, and I like people like that. So I thought that would be really great. If you don't know Dan Price's story, he started his company when he was in college with his brother. He was making a lot of money and then realized that people who were working for him were really living in poverty, couldn't make ends meet. So he did some research. He cut his own salary. He wrote a book about it. He cut his salary to make what everybody else in the company was making, $70,000, and looked at research that showed that people kind of making $75,000, that was kind of the baseline where people could be happy, and that people who were making more than that weren't really that much happier than those making $75,000. So he went about and did that. And so I thought it was super interesting. He wrote a book about it. And his Twitter feed and his Instagram feed are really smart and really thought-provoking. And so I thought, well, let's talk. And I wanted to meet him. And there he is from Seattle. I'm saying sometimes he does interviews from his kitchen. I saw he's got hair almost as long as mine. Lord have mercy. We're going to have the hair off. There he is. Hi, Dan.
Hey, Maria. It's really nice to be with you. It's a huge pleasure.
Oh, I'm so glad I'm finally meeting somebody who's got as long as hair as I do.
I'm working on it. I have I think it's fair to say I have pandemic hair, so that's good.
Yeah, I have pandemic hair too. Yeah, well, listen, I'm so excited to meet you. And I was just saying that my son told me all about you. Patrick, he's 27, young entrepreneur, idolizes creative business leaders like yourself. And I started reading up on you, and I was so inspired, really inspired. And I thought, well, here we are kind of careening into the holidays, so many small business leaders thinking they can't survive. And I just thought it would be really great to talk to you about what your advice is right now for small business owners and for the employees of those business owners.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, and tell Patrick I said hello, and I'm grateful for him and that he connected us, because that's really cool. And yes. I've been your fan for a long time, and so it's real nice for me to be able to connect with you like this. It means a lot.
Thank you.
So tell Patrick thank you, and thank you to you for making the time. I mean, if I'm being honest, it's kind of a tough question right now, because I see a certain amount of advice being given out there, and I'm kind of guilty of doing this at times, about creativity and hustle.
Yeah.
And of course, as individuals and as business owners, I mean, as you pointed out, I started my company in college, but I actually started building it when I was a junior in high school. And I've been making payroll. I'm 36 now. I've been making payroll, for quite a long time because I've been building this for 19 years.
Wow.
And so I know all about individual responsibility, and I believe in individual responsibility, and I don't want to say anything to poo-poo that. But also, I have seen so many small businesses right now who are actually being very creative, very agile, doing everything they possibly can, and still not making it.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's not me saying that individual responsibility doesn't matter. I don't believe in that, but it is me just acknowledging, and I think doing the duty of acknowledging reality. And of course, because those of us who are the lucky ones in this time right now, our lives have been affected too, right? There's challenges that I face as, a single guy that lives alone, and we can pretty much do everything on Zoom. So, it's hard on me from a mental health standpoint to be so isolated in those things. But I see out there so many people that are in just such a difficult position, and small business owners are really at the top of that list. One example is there's a small business close to me called the Fat Hen, and they make this beautiful creative food that, Maria, if next time you're in Seattle, you would love it, and I would love to take you and or Patrick there. But they make just these beautiful egg dishes and various dishes, and it's really wonderful. But it's the type of place that it doesn't really translate to go food. It doesn't translate in the age of Uber, because they really put all the love and creativity into kind of serving you and having it be there in a certain way. And so that business, it's really tough, and they pivoted and they've tried to, sell olive oil and eggs and different things so that people can bring that food experience home. And it's helping a little bit, but in all of these cases, it's just so tough. And I think that the most important thing that we have to do before we think about how can we react is just try to get a good assessment of where we are right now. And where we are right now is there's such a massive consolidation of wealth and power, which we've been familiar with, what's been going on, and you talked about it. Now that same thing that happened to people and workers in places like Michigan and Ohio, it's happening now to small businesses, where the likes of Amazon and Walmart and all these huge corporations are just eating their lunch. And so I think it's incumbent on all of us to recognize what's happening and do everything we can to stop it. And so I think that the main advice I have to small business owners, and I'm one of them, is, we have to speak in unison, and we have to demand our rights. And if we don't do that, then it may not matter what business decisions we make at the individual level.
But Dan, how do you mentioned Walmart, Amazon kind of eating our lunch, so to speak. What can we do about that? Everybody goes I don't want to support Amazon, but it's so easy. I just get it in 24 hours. And what is the responsibility of a leader like Jeff Bezos?
It's really hard for us to do much, because even myself, sometimes I'm like, man, I can't find this thing that I need anywhere else except for Amazon. And also, do I have an extra few hours right now to identify, some other place where that thing will be? Yeah. And I think because of that, we have to have accountability. I think that we have to recognize that in the profit-seeking environment, there is a systemic cost that we all suffer. And we have to have those corporations, we don't need to penalize them. We just have to charge them the systemic cost that they are taking away from us. And right now, we don't really have mechanisms to do that. And somebody like Jeff Bezos, he could be a hero if he came out. He could take a third of what he's made in the pandemic, and he could pay all of his warehouse workers my $70,000 minimum wage, and it would round to zero in terms of how it would affect him. It wouldn't
Well, that's
affect
what
him.
I've been thinking. A lot of people I've talked to said, well, why doesn't a leader like that do that?
So there's an ideology in the business world that is summed up in a statement that I heard from a friend of mine who does not agree with me. And I really value and like people that disagree with me and are honest with their perspective. I really value that. Mm-hmm. And I know I come from a place of privilege to be able to say that. So I recognize that not everybody can say it the way I can. And I appreciate you all out there. But a guy said to me, if you're not loyal to your capital will get jealous and find a new home. And so there's a belief out there that basically the system is so powerful that if you don't kind of, in a way, like bow to those desires of the system, that you will get swallowed up by it and you will lose a lot of your agency. And the problem with this is that it's not so easy to dismiss and say that it's not true, because if you look at how vast and powerful and compounding these power structures and these stores of wealth like Amazon.com have become, you know, it does start to swallow everything up. So kind of either you play by their rules, but then if you're the guy, Jeff Bezos, running it, you believe in this ideology so deeply that you think it's okay for upwards of soon to be 1 million people to suffer, work in subhuman conditions, then go home to a very difficult life where they are sacrificing their physical and mental health in service of building his business because they literally have no other option. And you believe that that is a morally righteous approach because you believe that is the only approach that will anoint you in the position that you are in. And so I say to Jeff Bezos, hey, Jeff, like, you can change this. Like, you can flip this switch and you can create like a better system and structure for humanity. But I say to all of us, let's not wait for him. Let's do it for ourselves instead of waiting for him to do it for us.
So how do we do that for ourselves? How do we flip the switch ourselves?
It's a lot of groundwork and just getting in touch with the basic facts of what is happening, I think, because at the political level where there is so much hate and there's so much divisiveness, and I get the reasons why, right? So I'm not here to defend any political figure. No one gets angrier at them than I do. And the fact that, you know, like, everyday people out there have done more for the American people in their time of need over the last 9 months than all of our politicians combined, you know, that's not lost on me. So I get where the anger is coming from. But I think that when we get angry at each other and we divide ourselves, we basically enable the system and those corporations to continue to be able to do whatever they want to do. So I think we have to come together around some of the basic facts, and what we have on our side comes at a high price. It's very tragic. I, reported just yesterday on my Twitter or the day before how an employee told me there was a line of cars outside his home because he lives 7.5 miles from a food bank. This is a man that lives 20 miles from Walt Disney World, and Disney stock and Disney shareholders and Disney executives have never been in a place where they are doing better. And yet this is the reality we face. And so we don't have to cast some kind of magic spell against each other. We don't need to manipulate each other. We just need to, with love and with compassion, have just an empathy and awareness for what's happening right now. And then some of the solutions that previously maybe would have seemed divisive, I think will seem very normal regardless of what political spectrum people come from.
But Dan, give me one thing that somebody can do right now who works at a small business, who runs a small business, who's being forced to close down. What is there one thing that we could do? Just one thing.
Yeah, be honest with each other. And I'll an example. So in my business, when the pandemic hit, our revenues derived from small businesses. So all of our small businesses got on average 55% of their revenue, which meant that we lost 55% of our revenue. And we need to be honest with each other. And by being honest with each other about what we're up against, our employees volunteered on an individual anonymous basis so there'd be no pressure to take pay cuts to help us get through the pandemic so that we could continue to make a difference fighting to support and shelter small businesses against bullies and corporations. But it started with just the honesty and the transparency of, hey, we just lost 55% of our revenue. We're losing $1.5 million a month. We're going to be out of business in 3 or 4 months, and we don't have a solution. I don't have a solution. I'm not going to make any extreme decisions to put this onto our employees or our customers the way the competition did. So it started with just that recognition. And one of the top business authors of all time, Jim Collins, who famously, teaches at Stanford Business School, in his books, he talks about acknowledging the brutal facts as one of the most important things that any small business or any business leader can do in a crisis. And so that's where just getting on the same page about these things and then being receptive and listening to the people that are actually in touch with what's happening, because they're the heroes. They're the ones that know the solution. It's not CEOs like me.
I love that. And you were fading out a little bit during that. So I just want to recap what Dan was saying is that as the leader brought the company together and said, okay, we're losing money. What are your ideas? How do we all stay afloat? And people anonymously and voluntarily cut their salaries so that other people could survive. And that came from their idea, right? And your idea, everybody collectively stepping in and saying, okay, we want to keep our jobs. And so if we all cut back, we'll be able to save each other. And yet there's so many companies here. I'm in California and they've closed down restaurants. Restaurants have built these so many restaurant owners built patios outside so that they could service people. The guy that does my hair closed down again, and he's a small business owner and they can't survive. They've let people go and they don't understand, it feels so, every state feels so different. It's so disillusioning, that one state is kind of having parties and fully operational. Other states, like where I am, completely locked down. And people have really lost heart. And I think some people have said to me, I want you to ask Dan if he'd ever run for office, because he brings up, a lot of systemic problems within the government.
Well, I think the problem with that is the systemic problems that I've seen in the corporate world have really either a mirror or have infected the things on the government side as well. And I'll give an example, a few years into starting my business, I got offered by a big venture capital firm here in Seattle, a few $1 million. And I'm like, if I take this money, I'm going to be legally obligated to do whatever I can that's good for shareholders, even if it means breaking promises, to employees and to customers. That's kind of how things are set up. And then a couple years after that, the aforementioned Amazon came calling with an opportunity to negotiate, selling the company to Amazon. And, now, that amount of money that potentially would have been on the table, could be worth billions if it would have been paid in Amazon stock. And so those incentives to basically get somebody like me out are there. And it's very hard to say no to those. And the same thing is true on the political side, which is why you see members of both parties taking in records amounts of money directly from corporations and from the wealthy. And then on top of that, you have the layer of super PACs. And then on top of that, you have the layer of the think tanks that are funded by the wealthy and the corporations. So, for somebody like me, it's I don't even know how I would begin to finance something like that, because the primary way that people are finding political power is having well-run organizations that are financed by the type of bad behavior that is hurting all of us.
Trust me, if you wanted to run, you would be able to run. That you would be able to find the money. You would be able to find the people that would rile up and support you. I have no doubt. You may not want to run, which is totally fine. But I think in following your Twitter feed, even how you kind of respectfully disagree with people or walk people through is certainly really, I think, interesting and needed in our political process. So I'm just shouting that out to you. The other thing I thought was super interesting, one of the things you said is that, as a leader, it's often lonely at the top, right? That as you're leading your company forward, as you're looking to kind of stay afloat, as you're looking to be a leader, talk a little bit about being lonely as a leader and what that's really like. I thought that was super interesting.
Yeah, well, I think that the way we've set up our system is kind of based on hero worship a little bit.
Yeah.
And we look at the exception and we say that that basically makes the system okay or the system righteous because there was that one person that kind of made it.
Yeah.
And there's been books that have been written. There's one that I read called The Meritocracy Trap. And it talks about how even those people on top, I don't want anyone to feel sorry for them, of course, but they are somewhat miserable in a way because they're kind of told, never stop working. It's basically the pressure of that constant need to grow and to have more. And, you could call it greed, but I don't think it's greed at the individual level. I think it's more systemic. And so that does create a huge amount of loneliness. And what helps me is I actually think by writing and my audience on here on Instagram and on Twitter, I think I learn more from them than they do from me. Truly, I believe that. And I know for sure I learn more from our employees and our customers than they do from me. And so, what we found is when we flip the whole system on its head, when instead of me making 33 times my lowest paid employee, making over $1 million, while my lowest paid employee makes 35,000, we found that by making that gap smaller, where our top executive now makes less than 300,000 and the people at the bottom make 70, it decreases that gap and it decreases that loneliness. But the other thing that we found out was those other people then can live that good life and you can kind of play off of each other. And we have some powerful proof points. We went from having 0 to 2 babies born amongst the 200 people at the company to we've had 60 now in less than 6 years. We also had a 10x housing boom. 70% of the company reported that they had paid down debt. And people between doubled and tripled what they were saving for retirement. And this at a time when our staff attrition was cut in half. And the amount of processing that we can do for small businesses tripled during that period of time. And so having a gap between the person that makes the least and the person that makes the most, there's really no problem with that. But if the size of the gap is like double or triple, then we're all in the same kind of world. We're all living a similar experience and we can relate to each other. Once it becomes 10x or 20x or 30x, we're not in that same world. We don't have that shared reality. Yeah. And I think what we've proven is that shared reality creates a better team outcome for the entire company.
How do you kind of, and this is a completely different, so many young kids coming out of college, they can't afford, they're living at home with their parents, they can't afford to buy a house, they don't even think about, they can't afford to have kids, all of that sort of stuff. How do you talk to young people and even people your age, because you're very young, about how much does one really need? We see Jeff Bezos going to be the first person to make $1 trillion. How much does one human being really need? And I know you did a video where you were saying that the research showed that happiness didn't change after $75,000. And I know there was a film about that and stuff, but how have you kind of worked that through yourself?
Yeah, I've changed the way I think about it a little bit, and so I'm still learning. I'm interested to know kind of how you think about that also, because I think I would learn from it. But I've started to think more about if you take money away,
Mhm.
does that make well-being or health or freedom go down? And so if you take $100,000 away from somebody making $1 million,
Mhm.
it does not decrease their health, freedom, happiness. But if you take $100 away from somebody making $30,000 a year, that
Right.
$100 has like very tangible negative effects on that person.
Yeah.
And so basically figuring out like what's the amount of money that's needed to kind of just live like a normal life. And it's not anything that's too novel, because since the 1970s, if we had shared the productivity gains from the 1970s, instead of having a $50,000 median income in the United States, for those that don't know, that means, the middle person in the United States income wise makes 50,000. That middle person would be making 100,000 right now if it were set in the same way that it was in the 1970s.
Mhm.
And so it's not like it's some kind of radical idea. And, with potentially two incomes in some households, or maybe just one if they don't need to anymore, about
They do.
$100,000.
Most people need two.
They
Yeah.
do, but it's because we're being paid half as much to produce the same productivity as what we were in the 70s. And so if we can just solve some of those things, then everybody basically has enough, but the people on top are getting most of the benefit, and everybody kind of downstream is suffering from being shortchanged through a redistribution. And so if we recognize the human cost of that, how that is hurting people's health, wellness, their mental wellness, and it's hurting their ability to show up to work and be productive, because if you're being harmed in that way,
Yeah.
I mean, that would affect any of us from a productivity standpoint, regardless of how strong we are. So remembering that sometimes you actually make money by spending money, and the best thing that you can invest in is people making enough that they can have whole agency, whole life, they can be a whole person. Then you can have kind of that group strength dynamic where we're all better together.
I totally agree. There's some people were saying in here, look at, I'm a hospice worker and I can't survive. I need a second job just to supplement my hospice work. And I think I read a Twitter feed that you had, I don't know if it was on your Instagram or your Twitter, but where you were talking about, people who are doctors, or some people who are nurses and school teachers, and that, we applaud them and yet they can't make a living wage, right? And
Yeah, if it's an essential job,
yeah.
why would we pay poverty wages to a job that we need? I mean, it just seems so illogical to me. And I think most people out there agree, but
Yeah.
I think the people out there that disagree are the ones that are holding the power right now.
But the majority hold the power, right? And it also depends, kind of, making $70,000 in one place is very different than making $70,000 in Los Angeles, right? Where the cost of living is impossible, where the taxes are super high. So there's that in and of itself, right? The cost of living, the salaries aren't the same in certain states. So it's also acknowledging the cost of living changes depending upon where you live or where your business might be operating, correct? But raising,
Totally.
you're talking about raising, every company leader should be looking at what they're paying their most important people, and their most important people aren't necessarily their COOs, their CFOs. They're the people that are actually keeping their businesses going at every level. So you're asking people to step back and look at every level, not blame it on the human resources, not blame it on, well, this is what the going rate is, but what is the right thing in your company, correct?
Absolutely. And I do think there is a role for us to play with our individual choices of trying not to support companies that are doing it the wrong way, and trying to support companies that are doing it the right way,
Yeah.
and having that holistic cycle. But also, I acknowledge that these large companies are kind of hell-bent on creating monopolies where we have no other option and we have to use them. And so for that reason, that's where I do think we have to look at the system. And I think that some of these facts, they don't get the kind of primetime media coverage because they're not going to drive cable news ratings in the same way that something would that's more divisive. But something that, Republicans and Democrats and people from all political spectrums that aren't the people on the very top can all agree, like, the world would be a better place if the people that were doing all the actual work, building the actual company, got a fair portion of that. And what you see in our story is one company that's doing that is flourishing. But at the same time, the fact that we're still talking about it almost 6 years later, what you see in our story is that the problem has gotten worse. And even though we've proven that this is a better way, it still is not happening. And that's kind of that tension that I'm seeing right now. And I think we all have to come together if we're going to change that.
Well, Dan Price, I want to thank you so much. I hope we'll continue this conversation. I'd love to continue talking to you, and maybe you could think about putting out a list of companies that we could support. Those of us who want to support companies doing it the right way, who will, not, fall into the Amazon trap and go over here and support that. So that would be helpful. I think if we got a list of, instead of doing this, what about this? And come up with a list of companies that are trying to do it your way and that are kind of breaking the mold or breaking the model. I think a lot of people want to support that. They may just not know where they are. And I think that's also a big thing to kind of how we can all educate ourselves better about companies that are trying to do it the right way. And so people saying, yes, I'd love a list. So I think that's something maybe we could work on together. You know a lot more about that than me. Are you hopeful as we go into the end of this year about 2021? If your business owners are out there, are you hopeful?
I'm worried because I see how dark things are looking, and I'm worried that we will go past the point of no return. But I'm hopeful because I see so many people doing everything they can to fight against that, supporting small businesses, supporting businesses that speak to their values and ethics, and not because of some fancy PR campaign or propaganda, but because they're really living it. And so my hope is all in the people, in the people watching this right now. And I appreciate you because, you've always been one to educate and inform people. And I think that if we can just talk to each other, and, you're seeing certain part of it, I'm seeing a certain part of it. And if we can all kind of share with each other and listen to each other, then I think we can come together. And that's what's really making me hopeful. And I'm seeing so many people across the country say, I'm going to do all my holiday shopping at small businesses. Instead of ordering Uber Eats, I'm going to call ahead and go pick it up so that the restaurant can get the whole thing and they don't have to give 30% to Uber Eats.
Yeah, we just had that conversation at the table the other night. Yeah, my son was like, why are you going to go to Uber Eats? Why are you going to go to DoorDash? They take 30%. They add this on. I was like, okay, I wasn't, okay, I won't do that. But so I think that's the thing. A lot of people here saying, please give us a list. Please give us a list. So I'm giving you the assignment to come up with some kind of a list that
and everybody out there that's saying that, you also, send me a recommendation. Send me things that you're seeing that are working, and maybe yes, I can work on it, but maybe we can all work on it together and all give our part of it. So
that's a better answer.
And I would absolutely love to keep the conversation going because you have an experience and insight that I really benefit from. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I'm so glad to discover you. I'm so glad that we're connected, and I look forward to continuing this conversation in the new year.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you, Dan. See, and I'm going to come for that date up there in Seattle for that. What is it called? The Fat Hen?
The Fat Hen. If anyone is in Seattle, it's such a great place. And they do these egg bakes these Italian style egg bakes and these delicious salads and sandwiches.
Is it open now? Is it open?
It's open for takeout. Our restaurants are currently shut down by state order.
Yeah.
And that maybe is a discussion for another day because I have a lot to say about that. But they're open for takeout and we can all go support it. And they even right now have a kit where you can make it at home. So everybody can go find businesses like that because we want this business to be around for a long time to really enjoy it.
The Fat Hen. So if you're in Seattle, go to the Fat Hen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes, first on the list.
Thanks,
Maria.
So much, Dan.
Okay, take care.
Nice to meet you.
Bye.
Oh, well, there you have. He's so attractive, as my mother would say. So attractive, so inspirational. I love to. I think he was right about we can come up with a list. Somebody saying, I love my hometown, Seattle, and people like you, Dan. Yeah, he was really pantry products for mail order. It has pantry products for mail order. Okay, great. So I'm not in Seattle, but if you're in Seattle, the Fat Hen. If you're in Ann Arbor, Zingerman's. Oh my gosh, we could go through the whole list of restaurants. So send us the list. And what we can all do, as I say, shop small, support these local stores, coffee shops, gift card places in your neighborhoods. They can't compete with the Amazons of the world. And his name is Dan Price, and you can follow him on Instagram. You can follow him on Twitter. And he has really good comments and thoughts, and he's very inclusive in the way he also disagrees with people, which I find always super inspirational. So thank you all so much for joining us. Again, Dan Price, Seattle is how you follow him on Instagram and on Twitter. Everybody here is smart enough to find him and probably knows a lot more about him than I do. But anyway, I'm so glad. He's brilliant. Yeah, he is brilliant. So young too. His hair's so long. Okay. Somebody, Maria, I write for the Los Angeles Times. I can help Dan for free to make the list. Great. Tell him that. Okay. I haven't been to Seattle, but I'll try to get there once things are back to normal. Me too. Yeah. I would like that. And if I go to Seattle, I'm definitely going to the Fat Hen. So let's support it so it's around for a long time so that, we can go there. Okay. Thank you all so much and have a wonderful rest of your day. God bless.